very much, Eko and people, Lydia, and good morning everyone. My bahasa Indonesia is tourist friendly, so I will have to speak English. When I'm speaking, if I start speaking too quickly, please tell me, and I will try to slow down. Now, today's is based on some joint research with my colleague, Professor Arif Ansori Yusuf at Pajajaran University. Just become a full professor at Pajajaran University. He's a big star. And it's my great privilege to have the opportunity to work with him. And our topic is about poverty incidence and inequality in Indonesia and what might be causing it. Now, I know that we have an audience that includes many students and also some experienced researchers, but the students seem to be in the majority. So, if you don't mind, I will try to give some comments for the benefit of the students in particular. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about my views about economic research. That's for the benefit of the students. The professors don't need my advice about how to do research. They've already had a lot of experience in that themselves. So I hope the professors won't mind. Some of my comments are directed specifically to the students. Economic research. In fact, any kind of research consists of only two things. Ask a good question, answer the question. That's it. The most important step is ask a good question. So what is a good question? A good question is something that's important and interesting and that might actually have an answer that we can obtain with the kind of information that's available to us. In your research program, the first step in your program is to come up with that good question. And that is something that takes time. Don't do that on day one. Interact with your supervisors to come up with a good question. That is a crucial bit. So I'm going to start with my question. My students in the Australian National University, whenever they give a presentation, I insist that the first PowerPoint slide that they have contain their question. If I don't see a question on slide 1, I'm not happy. So, I better have a question, hadn't I? So here is the basis for the question. The Asian financial crisis, of course, that was 1997 to 1999 or 1998, depending on where you draw the line. The Asian financial crisis was a disaster for Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia and Thailand, to a lesser extent Malaysia. It was a disaster. And but prior to that, over the 2 decades prior to that, so 1976 to 1996, that was a decade of rapid economic progress in Indonesia and rapid reduction of poverty incidence. Over that time, the annual rate at which poverty incidence declined was 1.44% per year. Now what I mean by that number is that supposing in 1 year poverty incidence was 30% of the population, then on average, 1 year later, it was almost 1.5%, almost 1.5% lower. So from 30 to 28.6, 28.56, and on average the rate of decline of poverty was like that. 1.5% of the population of Indonesia exited from below the poverty line to above the poverty line per year. Well, that's fantastic progress. If you sustain that over a long period, you get tremendous change in the society and tremendous reduction in poverty incidence. And I can see this change over the time that I've been visiting Indonesia. I first came to Indonesia in 1980. I came to Jogja. I visited UGM at that time. I met Dr. Budiono here at UGM at that time. And at that time, 1980, Indonesia was still a poor country. It was a low-income country. And Indonesia is now a middle-income country. A lot of progress and a lot of reduction in poverty, and you see the change so dramatically. This is only my second visit to Jogja. I hope to come again in the future. Now, after the Asian financial crisis, which, let's say, jumped the crisis. The crisis increased poverty incidence a lot. Let's take the period 2000 to 2015. Over that 15-year period, the annual rate at which poverty declined was only 0.53%, which is 37% of the pre-crisis rate. So the rate at which poverty came down declined a lot. Now, one possible explanation is, after the crisis, the Indonesian economy grew more slowly than it did before the crisis, and so that would explain it. Well, no, not really, it doesn't, because the post-crisis rate of GDP growth per person has been almost 90% of the pre-crisis rate, comparing those two periods, 2 decades before the crisis and the 15 years after. The rate of growth is a bit slower after the crisis, 90% of the pre-crisis rate. 90% of the pre-crisis growth rate, but the rate of poverty reduction is only 37% of the pre-crisis rate. So the power of growth to reduce poverty has declined. Growth has become less inclusive in Indonesia. The data tell us that. Indonesia's data tell us that. Well, at the same time, the Gini coefficient of inequality has changed radically. There wasn't much change in the Gini coefficient over those 20 years prior to the Asian financial crisis. Not much change. But after the crisis, there really has been dramatic change. Between 2000 and 2015, the Gini coefficient for Indonesia has increased from 0.30 to 0.41. Now, just in case there's someone here who doesn't know what the Gini coefficient is, it's a measure of inequality of incomes, and the number varies between 0 and 1. 0 is the lowest possible conceivable level of inequality, and 1 is the highest possible level. So only one person in Indonesia has all of the income. That's inconceivable, but that's the meaning of Gini 1. 0 would mean everybody in Indonesia has the same equal level of income. Now I said income, that in fact the measure of inequality within Indonesia is based on real expenditures of households. All of these data come from the Susanas survey, conducted by the BPS intercover. They're based on expenditure. Now, for the benefit of students, let me just make this one point about comparing Gini coefficients between countries. You might like to compare Indonesia with Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, and so on. Very difficult because some countries use expenditure, like Indonesia, use expenditure of the household as its measure of the basis for comparison of inequality. Other countries use household income. So the question for the students now, if you suppose we have a country that uses both expenditure and income to measure inequality. So you've got two measures. Which would be higher? Gini coefficient based on income or Gini coefficient based on expenditure? Which would be higher? Someone please give us a guess. Please.
I think it would be higher if we use income as a measure because income varies between people while consumption, at least on basic consumption between people, is the same.
More similar. Yes, you're right. Based on expenditure, you get lower levels of inequality than you do based on income. And the basic reason is the difference between income and expenditure is saving. And rich people save more as a proportion of their total income. So there's one difficulty in comparing published Gini coefficients between countries. If one country uses income and another country uses expenditure, the one using income will have a higher Gini coefficient just because of that. But there are many other problems of comparison between countries. One is, when you measure expenditure, do you include the implicit rent that households who own their own housing implicitly are paying for their occupation of their own house? If you rent, you pay rent in money. If you own the house, you don't pay any rent, but you consume the services of the house that you own. And that's part of your consumption, but it's not measured in money expenditure. So do you count that or not? Well, Indonesia does. Many other countries do. Some don't. And what about consumer durables like cars and refrigerators and TV sets and so on? If you don't happen to buy that in a particular year, but you're consuming the services of those things, that's logically belonging to expenditure. Some countries count that stuff, others don't. And that really affects the measure. So, I just warn you, big problem comparing Gini coefficients between countries. Now, back to Indonesia. So long as we're comparing for Indonesia, keeping the basis of the measure constant, those problems don't arise. Over time, Indonesia has kept its measurement of inequality and poverty incidence consistent, so we can compare over time for Indonesia. But comparing across countries is very difficult. Right, so now, at the same time that we have this phenomenon, an increase in inequality and a slowdown in the poverty-reducing power of economic growth, you can see that those two things are almost the same phenomenon, just describing it in different ways. If the poverty-reducing power of growth declines, that means the poor are getting less of the additional growth. That means inequality is rising. Less inclusive growth, more inequality are really the same thing. So, at the same time that has been happening, many other changes have occurred in Indonesia. And we are trying to figure out, Professor Arif and I are trying to figure out what caused this increase in inequality. That increase in the Gini coefficient, 0.3 to 0.4, that is one of the biggest increases in inequality that have ever occurred, measured inequality, ever occurred for any country, anywhere in the world. This is a big deal. Now, I can't go back to ancient history because we have no Gini coefficient for ancient Egypt and ancient Greece and so on. But in the recent history, when we have, for which we have statistical evidence, that's one of the biggest ever. Actually, the biggest ever seems to have been Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was a huge increase in inequality at that time. Indonesia seems to be number 2 in the history that we have available to us. And this is not a record that Indonesia really wants. Indonesia does not want to be the world leader in increasing inequality. So anyway, our research program, Professor Arif and I, is try to figure out what caused it. And today's talk is based on our first step in our attempt to explain this increase in inequality. So this is really only the beginning of a research program. We have some other hypotheses that we will explore in later research. We'll start with this one because this one is protection. Protection is a trade policy. That's our hypothesis for today. Did protectionism in Indonesia cause the increase in inequality, or protection in the rest of the world caused it? The reason we start with that hypothesis is that economic theory tells us that changes in trade policy have significant effects on poverty and inequality because they affect relative prices of commodities, and the Stolper-Samuelson theorem, which I'm sure you've learned about in trade theory, tells us that that has magnified effects on factor incomes, which drive the incomes of households. So protection seems a good starting hypothesis for this. And over this same period, when inequality has increased in Indonesia, that is, since the Asian financial crisis, trade protection in Indonesia has increased. Now, what I mean by trade protection is 2 kinds of things. 3 kinds of things, really. Tariffs on imports. Non-tariff barriers to imports. Quantitative restrictions, other regulations that are introduced for protectionist purposes. So that's protection of imports. And second, taxation of exports. It's a similar thing because trade protection of imports raises the price within Indonesia of imported commodities. And export taxation lowers the price within Indonesia of exported commodities. Both those kinds of interventions raise the price of imported commodities relative within the country, relative to exported commodities, in comparison with their international prices. And there have been changes in both those dimensions. So the question is, does the increase in protectionism, both in the world economy outside Indonesia, and also within Indonesia, does that explain the increase in inequality that's occurred? That's my question. Now, I'm going to tell you the answer right away, just in case some of you can't stand the lecture and you want to leave. I want you to know what my answer is immediately. So our answer is that the increase in protection that's occurred within Indonesia has contributed to slowdown of poverty reduction, increase in inequality. But the effect is not big enough to explain the dramatic change that's occurred. So this hypothesis, changing trade policy in Indonesia, caused the increase in protection. Yes or no? The answer is, well, no. Not really. Its effect is not big enough. Even though the direction is consistent with the hypothesis, the magnitude just is not. So I'm going to try to argue that all the increased protection that occurred in the world economy outside Indonesia might have contributed something like a 0.18 percentage point slowdown in the rate of poverty reduction. But the rate of poverty reduction slowdown that we have to explain is 1.4, that's the pre-crisis rate, minus 0.53, that's the post-crisis rate, that's 0.91 percentage point per year slowdown. That's the slowdown in the rate of poverty reduction. Well, protection in the world economy might explain that much of that. It's only 1/20th of that. So that's not a very good explanation if it only explains 1/20th. And protection within Indonesia itself, I'll be arguing, also explains some of the slowdown, that much per year, which is even less than the protection in the global economy. But even if you add them together, still, this is not a powerful explanation for the slowdown in poverty reduction, the increase in inequality. If you want the full answer, you're going to have to invite me back when Professor Arif and I have made further progress in our research with other hypotheses. So I'm telling you the answer just in case some of you are so disappointed with the answer that you want to leave immediately. You're free to do so. Right. Anti-globalisation is what I mean by increased protection. Why? Because when you increase protection, you are cutting yourself off from the world economy. Now, prior to the Asian financial crisis, Indonesia reduced its rate of protection a lot, especially in manufacturing. And this was a contributor to the very rapid growth that was achieved during that pre-crisis 2 or 3 decades, 2 decades. Yeah, 2 decades. It reduced its rate of protection a lot. Since the crisis, there's been some globalization reversal within Indonesia, an increase in protection. I'm going to show you the numbers in a moment. That's what I mean by anti-globalization. It's resistance to globalization. Donald Trump is the world's best example of anti-globalization. Donald Trump tells the voters the problem that you're experiencing in your lives with loss of jobs in manufacturing in the United States, slow wages growth, that is caused by globalization, especially those bad people in China. They and other developing countries too. Probably would, if you had enough time, you mention Indonesia too. It's caused by those bad people competing with us, stealing our jobs. And so that's globalization, allowing other countries to compete for American goods for the purchases of American consumers. That's globalization. And Donald Trump is blaming that for the problems of people in the United States. That's anti-globalization. He wants to increase protection in the United States against Chinese goods, Indonesian goods, etc. That's what I mean by anti-globalization. Okay, so two topics I'm discussing: poverty and inequality, anti-globalization. What's the link between them? That's the subject. Right, now, poverty incidence in Indonesia. A fantastic record. You may not realize how unusual Indonesia is in the global economy, in the rate at which poverty incidence has come down in Indonesia. Only China has a better record. Only China. Thailand is very close to Indonesia in this respect. But Thailand, Indonesia, China, these are really unusual cases where the incidence of poverty has declined so much. And just to make sure everyone understands this, incidence of poverty means the percentage of the total population whose expenditures are below the poverty line set by the government, set by BPS, Bureau of Statistics. Poverty line is held constant in real purchasing power over time. That's the way poverty incidence is measured. So if that proportion of people below the poverty line falls, that means people are moving from real expenditures below the poverty line to real expenditures below the poverty line. That's what we want. If that's not what development is about, I don't know what is. That's really key, a central measure of the success of economic development. Not the only one, but it's a key one. And look at the record for Indonesia. Go back to 1970. Poverty incidence in Indonesia, about 60% of the population, using today's poverty line. And it declined to about 12%, just prior to the Asian financial crisis. And then it jumped up with the Asian financial crisis. As I said, it was a disaster. But please notice this. Even though the Asian financial crisis was a disaster and poverty went up, it was nothing compared with the reduction, it was small, compared with the reduction that had occurred over the 26-year period before that, 1970 to 1996. The reduction was tremendous, much bigger than the increase that occurred with the financial crisis. But the financial crisis was bad news. And since then, you see that it's much flatter than it was before the financial crisis. And you probably can't read that from where you are. You probably can't read that, but what this says is all means the whole population, so that's that line there. Just focus on that colour. I don't know what to call that, green maybe. Focus on that colour. Urban poverty incidence is the light blue line, and rural poverty incidence is another colour. That's urban. That's urban, lower. That's rural. Rural is always the highest, and urban and total is in between. Poverty incidence for the country as a whole, that's what's called total, that's what's called all there. I think this legend is not, Poverty incidence for the country as a whole has to lie in between rural and urban because it's the population-weighted sum of the two. It has to lie in between. Right, so that's poverty incidence. Came down a lot, and then the rate of decline slowed after the financial crisis. What about inequality? Okay, the Gini coefficient data, we have here Indonesia as a whole, that's the blue line. We have urban and rural, but let's just focus on the data for Indonesia as a whole, so that's the blue line. After 1980, it was quite stable. Sure, you can't read that and I can hardly read it myself, but that's 1980 there. Hardly changed until we got to the financial crisis. And then jumped around a bit with the financial crisis, and then look what's happened. Since, let's say, 2000, it's increased a lot. It increased until about 2011, and since 2011, it's flattened out. That's equal. And that's that big increase from the Gini coefficient around 0.3 to around 0.4 that I mentioned, and it's big by international standards. Increase in inequality since the crisis is big. Okay, now let's look at world trade. World trade as a share of world GDP was the growth of it relative to world GDP was well in excess of world GDP growth prior to the financial crisis. In fact, until we get to about 2008, that is true. So if the growth of world trade, that's the blue line, if that is, the growth rate is higher than the growth rate of GDP, then the ratio of trade to GDP must be increasing. The ratio was increasing for this whole period, global level, until we get to about 2008, 2009, and then from 2009 onwards, the growth rate was about the same. So the increase in world trade as a share of world GDP stopped after about 2009. And then over that period they're growing at about the same. Now the studies of this phenomenon have attributed the slowdown of world trade relative to world GDP growth to increased protectionism. We're talking about Europe, the United States in particular. Increased protectionism. And this slowdown of trade relative to GDP is also true for Indonesia. In fact, that's the world economy. For Indonesia, since the Asian financial crisis, the ratio of trade to GDP has been declining consistently ever since the Asian financial crisis. Why? Well, at the global level, increased protection has been many studies by the World Bank and others that made this connection. And for Indonesia, there's been an increase in protection as well. So now let's look at the global level. Here is the some data that come from the World Trade Organization on trade restrictions in major importing countries. This is the whole world, including Indonesia, but most of this story is United States, Europe, Japan, China, and so on. And you see that the number of restrictions on trade has increased very radically since 2008. That's just counting the number. So this is looking at tariff lines in the commodity classification. Now let's look at some Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. This is just the number of trade restrictions. This could be tariffs or it could be non-tariff barriers. The increase in the number of trade restrictions has been much higher in Indonesia than it has been in Malaysia or Thailand. All three countries have intervened more, but Indonesia more than the others. Now, we, in our study here, have benefited from the research done by our colleague in the United States, and his name is Professor Stephen Marks. And Professor Marks has been here in Indonesia this week also. Right now, where is he right now? He's in Bali, having nice, enjoying the volcano. Anyway, Professor Marks has done a very important study, which is about to be published in the December 2017 issue of the Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies. I recommend it. Very thorough study of the changes in protection in Indonesia, especially non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers are harder to measure than tariff barriers because the effective tariff barriers on prices can be gauged quite accurately by looking at the published tariff rates. Non-tariff barriers are quantitative interventions which are harder to, whose effect on prices is harder to measure. Nominal rates of protection are all about domestic prices in comparison with international prices. So here's what Stephen Marks' research has said about the change in nominal rates of protection 2008 until 2015 for Indonesia, a 7-year period. That was the basis of the research. And the meaning of nominal rate of protection is if the domestic price of a commodity increases relative to the international price, and that is an increase in the nominal rate of protection. For example, simple example, you have a tariff 100%. That means a tariff means a tax on imports. Tax on import 100%, we're talking about an imported commodity, let's take rice. For Indonesia, rice is an imported commodity. Although it's produced domestically, it's also imported. Suppose there's a 100% tariff. No one will import the rice and sell it within the domestic market unless they get that tariff back. So the importer has to pay the international price for the rice, the CIF import price, plus he has to hand over to the government the tariff, 100%. So he will charge when he sells that rice on the wholesale market, import price, CIF, plus the tariff. So the domestic price will be approximately 100% above the international price. The nominal rate of protection will be 100%. Domestic price will be double the international price. That's the meaning of nominal rate of protection. Everybody okay with that? Nominal rate of protection. Well, the average nominal rate of protection for food crops in Indonesia increased from 2008 to 2015 from something like 13% to 33%. And for average for food, beverages and tobacco, it increased from something like 5 to 13.7. So for food items, protection has increased. That means that the prices that Indonesians have to pay for imported food went up by, in the case of food crop, 33, in the case of average of food, beverages and tobacco, 13. Well, in his paper, Marx has numbers at a much more disaggregated level. For rice, it went up from something like 20% 2008 to 65% in 2015. Big increase. Nominal rate of protection. Nominal rate of protection. The nominal rate of protection is all about how the structure of prices within the country is altered relative to the structure of international prices, altered by trade policy. Trade policy includes both tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Now, in the case of rice, let's take this example, the main source of that increase in protection is non-tariff barriers, quantitative restrictions on quantity imports. Here's the way to think of a non-tariff barrier. The difference between a non-tariff barrier and a tariff is it's like this. If it's a tariff, then when you import the commodity, you have to pay the government for the right to import. The government gets the revenue from the collection of that tax. A non-tariff barrier, like an import quota, is different from that in that the government says, sorry, but you cannot import any more than this quantity of that good into Indonesia. And we have some tickets that are the right to import the commodity. And the total amount of those tickets is the amount of the import quota. If you happen to be the lucky owner of one of those tickets, then you collect the difference between the international price and the higher domestic price. So that ticket is like the right to collect a tariff for yourself. I'd love to have some of those tickets because that's a privately collected tax. That's what an import quota is. It's a privately collected tax. So the difference between an import quota and a tariff, the main difference is it's not the government who gets the revenue, it's the guy who owns those import quotas. It's the guy who owns those tickets. And you can be very sure that importers would love to have some of those tickets because it's the right to import something at a price of, let's say, 100 and sell it domestically at a price of 150. That's all you do. You just import it, sell it, you get 50% pure profit. Thank you very much. That's the way to get rich. So there are two components of Indonesia's change in protection that are really important, according to Marx. First is food crops, and processed food, that's food, beverages, and tobacco. Processed food, and this is raw commodities like wheat and rice and that kind of thing. And then the other component is other mining. Okay, other mining has been subject to export taxes. Other mining means bauxite, nickel, minerals like that. For the discussion that follows, I'm going to talk mostly about food, because for our story about poverty and inequality, food is by far the more important form of protection than the other mining. Other mining, this export taxation doesn't do anything much for poverty or inequality. You'll see that. But food, that's not important. So that's Stephen Marx, legitimate Indonesian economic status. Right, now, back to the big question, how does globalization, reversal or anti-globalisation, affect poverty and inequality? Well, we are using a general equilibrium model of the Indonesian economy that was constructed by Professor Arif Pajajaran over a period of several years, and it's called Indonesia E3. It's his creation, and Indonesia E3 is a general equilibrium model using all of the detail of the input-output tables, and adding to that is aggregated household sector. The model has 100 rural households, 100 urban households. Get their incomes from ownership of factors of production and who buy the goods and services defined in the Indonesian social accounting matrix. And the beauty of this aggregation by households is that you can work out what happens to poverty and inequality as a result of changes to the policies or external environment. And I'm not going to talk about the structure of the model at all today, beyond saying just what I just said, because I don't have time. There's many papers by Professor Arif that describe his model. I'll have to leave you to follow up. That, you won't have time to do that. So we're using the model to figure out what happens to poverty and inequality. More correctly, what I should have said is not figure out, but estimate. We estimate what happens to poverty. So we have two scenarios. First is the world globalization reversal. And from the WTO, we get the estimate that protection in the rest of the world has increased by about 20%. Increase in protection outside Indonesia. So our global, the world globalization reversal scenario is that 20% increase. And the second is really much more detailed. It's Indonesia's own globalization reversal based on the numbers from Marx's paper, Stephen Marx's paper, that I just summarized. First, global anti-globalisation, and then Indonesia's own globalisation. And we take the world's globalisation first. And here are the findings of our analysis. Along this axis, we have the Indonesian urban and rural populations separated, divided by centile. What that means is the poorest 1% of the urban population is in centile 1. And then centile 2 is the second 1% of the urban population measured in terms of expenditure per person. So we take the data on all the urban households in Indonesia, take the data from Susunas, and we arrange all the households in Susunas by expenditure per person in the household. 1% that is poor, the poorest that is lowest, is put there. And the second 1% is in centile 2. Third is in centile 3. And the 100 centile, way over there, that's the richest 1% of the urban population, measured in terms of expenditure per person. And this part of the diagram does the same thing for the rural household. And this blue line down here is what the model tells us about the change in real expenditure per person as a result of the globalization at the rate of 20%. Increase in protection at the global level of 20%. Poverty incidence goes up as a result of global protectionism by 0.61%. But that is over 7 years, from 2008 to 2015. The Gini coefficient within Indonesia doesn't change at all. In rural areas, poverty incidence goes up more. Poverty incidence goes up more in rural areas. Why? Why? Global protection increases poverty in rural areas within Indonesia more than urban areas. So that gentleman there's already answered one question, had a very good one, very good answer. So somebody else, please, that row there, somebody have a guess. Why does global protection increase poverty incidence in rural areas more than urban areas? Global protection. It's tough question. Well, the answer is Indonesia's commodity-based exports. Indonesia's export composition is heavily commodity-based, and global protection reduces the demand for Indonesia's commodity-based exports. And that hurts rural people proportionately more than urban people. Poverty goes up by 0.182%, but that's not per year, that's over 7 years. And here we have the implied change in the turn to factors of production. In real terms, the key point is that agricultural workers are the group that are hurt the most. And that's why rural poverty goes up the most. And because rural poverty is highly influenced by what happens to agricultural workers. Agricultural workers' real incomes decline a lot. That's why rural poverty goes up. And here is the effect of that at a commodity level. The globalization reversal in the international economy lowers the output of these rural-based commodities more than manufactured output, more than services. Okay, so globalization at the world level, I'd like to emphasize, affected poverty in urban areas, yes. Poverty in rural areas, yes. Didn't change the Gini coefficient at all in either case. Didn't change it. Well, this 0.182%, that's not per year, that's over 7 years. So per year, this is small compared with that 0.91% global poverty reduction slowdown that we're trying to explain. So the globalization reversal in the international economy, that's bad for Indonesia, no doubt about it. This does not explain why poverty reduction slowed down as much as it did, and it doesn't explain it at all inequality reduction. What about Indonesia's own protection? Remember that it was in two groups of commodities, food and processed meat, and mining. Okay, now to work out, here's a bit of theory that you need to know. To work out the effect on a household, here is a decomposition that's very effective. You need to know this to understand what comes next. Total effect on the real expenditure of a household. Wait a minute. Real. What's that? What does real expenditure mean? So, second chance for the students in the back row over there. You didn't answer the previous question, so here's your next chance. What does real mean? No one's brave enough to answer. Okay. I think many of you know, but you're not brave enough to answer. Real means this. In economics, we measure things in money, but the value of money changes over time. So what we do is we divide the value of things, measured in money, by the change in the prices of commodities. So we have consumer price index, wholesale price index, something like that, that measures inflation. And we take inflation out of money measures. So that what we end up with is not a change in money, but it's equivalent to a change in quantity. We're not interested in money. Many years ago, when I was a student, I was eating in a cafe, and the waitress said, "What do you study?" "Economics." She said, "Oh, so you mean you count coins all day?" She said, "That's bankers, that's bankers." Now, economics is not about money primarily. It's about goods and services. It's about the quantity of stuff, quantities of stuff. That's what we're interested in. Not money, because the money, inflation changes the value of money. So 1 rupiah today has a different value from 1 rupiah 30 years ago. Real divides the money quantity of the nominal money amount of things by an index of prices. That's real. Okay, so the real expenditure effect is a change in incomes measured in money divided by a change in prices. And we make this distinction because protection has important effects on both of those things. Suppose, and price effect, this doesn't mean the consumer price index. Because suppose we have a very poor household that consumes, poor households tend to consume a very high proportion of food in their budget. The consumer price index is based on the average budget share of food in the expenditure of the typical Indonesian household. But the very poorest person, so food might be 20% of that expenditure in the CPI. But for the poorest household, it might be 70%. So the poorest household, price effect, has to measure the change in prices of the goods that they consume, not the average, not the change in the average of prices consumed by the typical Indonesian household. By the way, the consumer price index for Indonesia is not based on the average consumption of Indonesian households. As I just said, it's not. It's based on 22 cities in Indonesia. So it's based on urban consumption expenditures, not the total for Indonesia. That's something that EPS would improve in the future. The price effect means changes in the prices of the goods actually purchased by this particular household. For some households, you want to work out changing its real expenditure means its income, depending on where it gets its income, and the prices of the goods that it buys. Okay. Price effect and income effect. So for urban households, the effect of that change in protection that I got from Marx's paper can be divided into two parts. The impact of that on households. Then we have the centiles, poorest urban centile up to the richest urban centile. So the richest urban centile that would be the richest 100. That would be most of you, wouldn't it? You'd be the richest. No. Oh. Certainly isn't me in Australia, I can tell you that. I was kidding, by the way. I know you're not in the richest 100%, probably, although you could be for all I know. But you're not in the poorest either, because the poorest cannot afford to go to university at all. They're out there selling stuff, scraping for a living, working on a farm, but not earning. Right, so the income effect on urban households is given by that blue line there, and the price effect is given by the red line there. The net effect on real expenditures of urban households is given by the difference. Income minus price. Income minus price. Yes. Income effect minus price. So it's very elementary logic. You get the money in the income, and if the price of the things you have to buy go up proportionately more than the income that you get, so in percentage terms, income effect minus price. It's all in percentage terms. Total effect is the difference between income and minus price effect. It's negative for every centile. Now, that doesn't, every centile except the richest urban households, who are the ones who own those import quotas. Because the increase in protection raised the value of the import quotas. If you restrict imports, the value of the right to import the good goes up. So if you're the owner of the right to import, you want the quota to be lessened so long as you're one of the people who get the ticket to import the good. Because the value of the tickets goes up. And so this is what happens to the richest urban centiles, the ones who own those quota rents, you see the quota rents. Aside from them, every urban centile loses. Now, rural, there's the income effect, there's the price effect for rural households, there's the difference. Every rural household, every rural centile loses. Now, this does not mean that every rural household loses. That doesn't mean that, because there are some rural households, say the large landowners, benefit a lot, because the increased protection of the food sector, for example, import restrictions on rice, raise the value of land, and so they benefit. But within each centile group within rural areas, that losers outweigh the gainers. That's what this means. Within each centile group, even the richest centile, according to the modelling that we've done. Now, it's quite possible for you to disagree with the modelling. Of course, there's lots and lots of empirical compromises that go into that. But before you tell us that it's rubbish, please read Professor Ravu's explanations of the model and the discussion of it, because it's based on serious research. It's not made up. It's based on serious quantitative data for Indonesia. Not made up. Okay, there's the distribution. Well, I'm not going to spend time. That was food. That's Indonesia's protection of food prices. I won't take time to talk about mining because it turns out not to be so interesting. So that's the total of them added together. So I'm only going to talk about food, so let's just look at this. The return, I already said this, it's kind of similar to the story that we saw for the world economy, except in reverse. Remember that globalization reversal hurt agricultural labour. Well, Indonesia's own protection raises income to labour in real terms, but now, after what I said about the meaning of the word real, you should say, okay, but what's the deflator? Because whenever anyone says the real value of something, you must immediately go bong, 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 bong. What do you mean by real? You mean that there's a deflator. Which deflator? Because the magnitude of these real measures depends on the deflator a lot. Here's an example. Real here means the CPI is the deflator. See, Consumer Price Index. Is that the deflator that's most appropriate for agricultural workers to measure what happens to their true welfare? Because these people don't consume that average bundle of commodities purchased by urban consumers as measured by the CPI. They measure a bundle that has a lot more food in it. And the price of food has gone up a lot. So this number is kind of misleading. Real here is not the concept of real that we want. So there's my, if you remember only one thing from this, please remember two things from this lecture. Number one, where I started, always ask a good question, that's the starting point. When I talk with research students, I always ask, what's your question? And the student who is progressing well with research has a one-sentence answer followed by a question mark. That's a student who is on top of his or her research. A one-sentence answer is question mark. The student who's not on top of it yet says, well, my topic is, and I'm interested in, blah, 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 and what follows is a paragraph. That is not a question. And you don't have a serious research project until you have a clear question, one sentence, question mark. That's the first thing you have to remember from this lecture. The second thing is whenever anyone says real, always say, yes, but what's the deflator? The next picture. Okay, here's a lot of one. Poverty. That's what we did protection on food, protection on mining, we add them together in total. Let's just focus on food. This is the level of protection in level of poverty incidence in Indonesia, 2008. 2008. I beg your pardon. Level of poverty incidence, 2008. 15.4%. As a result of the increased protection that Marx estimated, poverty incidence goes up from 15.412 to 15.482. And remember, that's over 7 years, 2008 to 2015. That's peanuts. That's small. That's really small. So, sedikit. And it's bigger. It goes up in both urban areas and rural areas as a result of food protection. See this? In rural areas, poverty incidence goes up because of protection of the food sector. So if there's a third thing that you want to get out of this lecture, it's that. Why does that happen? And should we believe this guy from Australia who's telling us this? What's the evidence for that? I'm going to come back to that point again when we get to the conclusion. Should we believe it? We shouldn't believe it unless we see clear evidence in support of it. I'm going to try to convince you that the evidence is good. Poverty goes up, but not by much. And Gini coefficient, as a result of protection of the food sector, hardly changes at all. Hardly changes. It's just other measures of inequality, they hardly change also. And so I said that we're not going to bother talking about mining because these numbers are so small that they're not worth talking about. So there's our answer. It's that protection of the food sector, as estimated by Marx, doesn't really explain the slowdown of poverty reduction in Indonesia. It worsened poverty, but not enough to explain the big change that's occurred. So I'm now at the conclusions. And I've already told you the answer in the very beginning, so I'm leaving that. The Asian financial crisis was a turning point, really a turning point for Indonesia in so many ways. Politics changed, economy changed, really a big turning point. And for other countries in Southeast Asia also. The Asian financial crisis, 1997, 98 or 99, that was pivotal point. And before the Asian financial crisis, the annual rate of production was this much, 1.4% per year, coming down every year. 1.4% of the population moved from expenditures, real expenditures, what is real meant, real expenditure. The deflator is the poverty line. Prices, goods and services that go into the construction of the poverty line. From real expenditures below the poverty line, real expenditures above it. A fantastic rate of poverty reduction. And then after the financial crisis, well, it slowed to only 0.53%, but 0.5%, that's better than nothing. So it's not that poverty reduction has stopped in Indonesia. It hasn't stopped, only slowed down. It slowed down quite a bit, right? 0.9%, 1.4 minus 0.5. Why did it happen? Well, it's not because growth slowed down. That contributed a bit. Growth slowed down only by about 10%. From post-crisis rate of growth was 89% of the pre-crisis rate of growth per person. And over that same period, the Gini coefficient of inequality increased from 0.3 to 0.4. That's a big deal, and in your research, those of you who are interested in doing quantitative research for Indonesia, there is something that really is so important for your country. You need to understand why that happened. In this paper, I've asked the question, was it protection that caused it? If only the answer was yes, I'd be getting ready for the Nobel Prize. Sorry, it didn't really do the job. No Nobel Prize for me. Or Professor Rodriguez. And in his case, not yet, but me, forget it. And, so this just says the kind of research that we did. And findings are, yes, protectionism contributed to a slowdown of poverty reduction, especially protection of the food sector, but not enough to explain what happened, and it doesn't help at all in explaining equality. So anti-globalisation in Indonesia, back to the title of my talk, Anti-Globalisation, it's been bad for poverty reduction and it's been bad for inequality a bit, but doesn't really. It's not the big story that we want. We don't have that big story yet. Big explanation. And ongoing research may do this. So that's exciting. It's a chance for you in your own research really to contribute to this, because no one knows why that increase in inequality has occurred in Indonesia. Big increase. No one can explain it, not yet. Great opportunity for you in your research to do something. Okay. And so, here's one of my favorite quotes from one of our former students at ANU, Professor Basri, everyone calls him Dede, former Minister of Finance, as you know. He's reflecting on his time in government. Here's what he said. We all know what to do. What we don't know is how to get re-elected after we do it. That's the problem that with policy making, you have to take politics into account, and this is not quite the same as what you learn in your economics classes. Okay, so I'll stop right there, and we can have questions and discussion.
Any question for Professor Warr?
Well, let me give you a question that I would have asked if I'd been you. I'll give you a chance on that. Here's the question that I would have asked. I would have said, now wait a minute, you just tried to tell us that increased protection in the food industry increases poverty incidence in rural areas as well as urban areas. Well, it's easy to see why it increases poverty in urban areas. Because urban people are consumers of food, they don't produce food. But an increase in protection has the effect of raising the price of food. Let's take rice. Raises the price of rice within Indonesia. If you produce rice for sale, then you're better off. Thank you for the increase in the price. Anyone who's a producer of rice for sale, net seller of rice, benefits from an increase in the price. But anyone who's a net buyer of rice, and I think that includes every single one of you, net buyer of rice. Nobody here who doesn't consume rice, and I doubt that there's anybody here who's a net seller of rice. So for you, an increase in the price of rice lowers your wealth. There's no income effect, there's only a negative price effect. So you're not thanking the government for that increase in the price of rice. For urban people, it's obvious that they lose from an increase in the price of rice. It doesn't raise their income, it raises their cost of living, so they lose. But what about rural people? What about all the poor farmers? Don't they gain? Well, yes, they do. Every farmer who's a net seller of rice gains from an increase in the price. Yes. Every rural person who's a net buyer of rice loses from an increase in the price. So to understand what happens to rural poverty as a result of the price of rice going up, you have to know who is a net buyer and who is a net seller. You cannot, for urban people, that's easy. Here's the data coming from the Indonesia Family Life Survey 2007. By the way, you cannot do this with Susunas, because Susunas has consumption of goods, not production. The Indonesia Family Life Survey has both production of each household and consumption of various goods. So you can compare production and consumption for the same household. You can see from that survey who's a net buyer. And for urban households, there are many more net buyers than there are net sellers. This is net sales. 0 means you're neither a net buyer nor a net seller. You're self-sufficient. You produce some rice, just enough to consume yourself. That's the meaning of 0. Negative means you're a net buyer. Net sale, negative. Positive means that you're a net seller. There's a distribution of urban households from that survey, and you see that the mode of the distribution is below 0. Most urban households are net buyers of rice, not net sellers. That's not a surprise. Not a surprise. What about rural households? Guess what? There are more net buyers than there are net sellers in rural areas. This is from the Indonesia Family Life Survey. All these people to the right of the 0 are the rural households who are net sellers. That includes any farmer who sells rice, but not the unskilled worker who works for him or her. Those people sell labour. They buy rice. So for those people, they're net buyers of rice. And all the rural people who are not who are not farmers are net buyers. So all the traders, all of the service providers of various kinds, they are all net buyers of rice. And many farmers, including rice farmers, are net buyers because they produce some rice, but not enough for their consumption. They buy supplementary amounts on the market. Within rural areas, there are more net buyers than there are net sellers. Now, may I ask this question? Who in the rural area would benefit the most when the price of rice goes up? What kind of rural people would benefit the most? Yes?
The middleman. It would be the middleman who enjoy the rise of the rice output, but not the farmer who cultivate them.
Not the small farmer, but what about the big farmer who sells lots of rice? What about him? Would he benefit or hurt?
For the big farmer who cultivate the stock of his of the rice, but also to process it to create added value to the market, he or she may enjoy the increase of rice by some kind of barriers of imports for rice of food commodity products.
Right. So, these people who benefit the most, are they rich people or poor people?
The rich people.
They're rich people. The people who benefit the most when the price goes up are rich already. They're the big farmers, they're the big middlemen, the wholesalers, marketing people, millers of rice. They benefit. The gentleman is right. What about the very small farmer? Do they benefit a lot? No, because they don't sell a lot. Yeah, they sell a small quantity and they consume most of it. So the majority of farmers, they are down here in this part of the distribution. They might have small net sales, might be small net buyers, but they're not these folks way out here in the tail of the distribution. This policy of increasing the price of rice as a way of helping small farmers, that is really a bad idea, in my opinion. Now, this is what the Ministry of Agriculture says is the point of protecting rice. Well, we want to help the small farmers. No, that is not a good way of helping the small farmers. It's a way of helping the big farmers. Big farmers, because they're the ones who sell the most. And it's a way of helping the middlemen in between. It certainly isn't a way of helping poor people in rural areas. Because these people, both in urban areas and rural areas, tend to be net buyers of rice, not net sellers. Okay, so I'm sorry, I carried away. This gentleman wanted to ask a question. Please.
Actually, my question, my name is Crawford. Actually, my question about the report is about the who enjoy the price, whether they are the farmers or whether the middlemen. That is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I think I have answered it before.
Good question. It's such a good question. I knew that would be a question, so I answered it already. Yeah. So the political economy of that. Here's why I like this quote from former Minister of Finance. It's about politics. That's why we have the protection of the rice sector in Indonesia. It's about politics. Now, you know more about this than I do, but if you want to study why these changes in protection have occurred, you have to study the political economy of it. And that's not my area of expertise. I don't know. But I do know that that's where you have to look for the explanation. The effect on poverty, sorry, but if you want to help poor farmers, this is not the way. But that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that trying to help poor farmers isn't a good idea. Of course it's a good idea, because poor farmers are often very poor people. And they may be left out of the process of economic growth in Indonesia. That is why policies designed to assist poor farmers and other poor people in rural areas are very important. Indonesia as a way of reducing poverty. This is really important, but protection trade policy is not a good instrument for doing that, for the reasons that I've tried to explain. It doesn't work.
Thank you. My name is Sikit. You challenged us while discussing the conclusion. You challenged us of what factors might also influence the increasing inequality in Indonesia. But I'm also interested to know your opinion. What other things might also influence the increasing inequality in Indonesia? Perhaps it might be your next research. Thank you.
Anything I say is hypothesis, because the research like this is not yet finished. Here's some guesses. Recently, there is a World Bank report on inequality in the world. It's called Riding the Wave. You can download it free, Riding the Wave. And just came out in December, this month. And this report says that what's happened in the global economy is not just that protection has gone up, global protection has gone up, but there's been a structural change in the demand for labour-intensive manufactured goods. A decline in the demand for those goods. That's due to shifting consumer preferences, but also productivity growth, mechanisation in the production of these goods, also a glut on the world market. And this report, Riding the Wave, says that's very important for developing countries like Indonesia. They don't really have the evidence. They just say it. So there's a hypothesis, and Professor Arif and I can test that hypothesis now. Does this change in the demand for Indonesia's manufactured exports do a good job of explaining the increase in inequality? It could, because over the period before the crisis, why did Indonesia grow so fast? Answer, growth of manufacturing, especially labour-intensive manufacturing for export, just like Thailand, just like Malaysia, just like China. But that growth has slowed down. So that's the World Bank hypothesis. So there's hypothesis number one. Hypothesis number two. That period from 2008 to 2003 to 2011, when inequality increased so much in Indonesia, was a period when commodity prices were high on the world market. Nothing to do with protection. Commodity prices were high. A period of commodity price boom. Does that help explain it? Well, we do have some quantitative estimates of the importance of that. And yes, it explains about a quarter of the increase in inequality that occurred in Indonesia. So it's a more powerful explanation than protection. And then a third one is the role of minimum wage laws in Indonesia. Hypothesis, not assertion. I'm not asserting this, but testing the question whether increasing the minimum wage caused a decline in the growth of employment, informal employment, receiving the minimum wage, and pushed people into the informal labour market as a result. Raising the minimum wage pushes people out of the formal labour market into the informal market, maybe. So that's our third hypothesis. So now I've given away all of our research. If you beat us to it now, you'll get the Nobel Prize in Markets.
Thank you.
Only hypothesis. I'm not saying that any of these turns out to be the explanation. We don't know.
My name is Sinta. Thank you for your nice and insightful presentation before. Actually, I want to ask about the tobacco import tax in import tariff, if we take a look at the consumption of the household in Indonesia, approximately 10% or more, like 11% of our expenditure is used to buy rice. Besides, in Indonesia, approximately like 10% of our expenditure is used for buying cigarette. So, how about the import tariff on the tobacco? Because if we, based on your presentation before, like the import tariff is harm for the small farmer. But actually, the high import tariff on the tobacco is beneficial for the government, especially to increase the government revenue. And besides, from the medical perspective, it's very useful to increase the health quality of Indonesia. But in another side, that there are so many cigarette consumers in Indonesia, so if we increase the import tariff on cigarette, it will harm the consumer of the cigarette. So, what do you think about the import tariff on the tobacco for the overall welfare of Indonesia, especially about the increasing inequality and the poverty reduction in Indonesia? Thank you.
What a good question. Fantastic question. Well, I agree with everything you just said. Now, when we measure the nominal rate of protection in this kind of study, like what Marx said, we're not making a judgment about whether the tariff is a good idea or not. It's simply measuring the amount by which the domestic price changes as a result of the policy. That's the nominal rate of protection. And that's what's gone into this analysis. Now, if you are a household that purchases tobacco products, you do lose from the increase in the price of cigarettes. So long as you continue to smoke them, you do lose. Now, part of the objective of the policy is to discourage consumption of tobacco for excellent reasons. Medical costs are increased. By the way, I'm a non-smoker. Medical costs are increased by the consumption of tobacco. And some of those costs are not borne by the household themselves, but passed on to others through the health system. So there's an externality involved in that. You might say, oh, if people want to smoke and they get negative health effects, that's their business. Well, not totally, because some of the costs are passed on to others. So there is a good argument in favour of discouraging cigarette consumption through excise taxes, import duties, other measures. Now, I don't know about Indonesia, but in Australia we now have a law that requires the seller of the cigarettes to have a horrible photograph on the outside the packet that shows what your lungs look like after 40 years of smoking cigarettes. It's really terrible. How you could smoke those things when you look at that picture, I don't know. And there has been some effect. Is that true in Indonesia also? Yes. Yeah. Horrible packaging. And of course the cigarette producers hate that, the manufacturers, they hate that. Too bad. Too bad. So there's a good reason for having tariffs on cigarettes and other measures to raise the price. But it's also true that those poor households who consume a lot of tobacco products are harmed by the tariff. So it lowers their real expenditure, but for a reason. So the health benefit that they might get if they reduce their consumption is not counted in our analysis. Quite right, that is very relevant. And there are other things too. For example, Indonesia has a ban on the export of endangered species. Well, that counts as protection in this kind of analysis. But that's good. We don't want endangered species to be wiped out by people taking them out of the country, or we're still killing them and they're exporting the dust or something like that. That's terrible. There are many examples where trade protection serves a genuine social purpose, and in some cases it's the only device the government has at its disposal for stopping something that's bad or reducing something that's bad, killing off endangered species, stopping the import of commodities that can bring in plant or animal diseases. Quantitative, that's a non-tariff barrier. The American, Donald Trump would say, oh, that's protection, that's bad, that's bad. But there's a reason for it, and that is it's due to presence of externalities. But by and large, protection is not about that. Like protection of rice. It's there to change the incentives for rice production relative to rice consumption. Indonesia has a goal of self-sufficiency in rice. Well, that's an objective that is pursued by the protection of the rice sector. The measurement of nominal rates of protection and its effect on household welfare is still valid, even though the purpose of the policy might be something like self-sufficiency. I just ask you this. Self-sufficiency in rice, who's paying for that? Whose welfare is reduced by the pursuit of that policy? The poor consumers. Who's getting the benefit in Indonesia? Well, the rich farmers and the rich middlemen. Thank you very much. So the policy might be described as having the benefit of self-sufficiency, but it's redistributing income from poor Indonesians towards rich Indonesians. Is that a good idea? No, there are better ways of pursuing the goal of self-sufficiency. What are they? Invest in productivity growth in agriculture. That improves the production of rice, improve infrastructure, investment in research in agriculture, especially in rice production. That increases productivity of rice production, increases output, enables imports to be reduced without hurting poor consumers. Because those policies do not increase the price of rice faced by poor consumers. Productivity growth, infrastructure investment, these are good ways of achieving greater self-sufficiency in rice without hurting poor consumers. So, I come back to my point that well, the goal of self-sufficiency is import restriction really the right way to go. Now, I once gave this talk, and somebody in the audience said, yeah, but you come from Australia, and you're an agricultural exporter. Don't you have an incentive to see Indonesia not restricting imports of rice? And my answer is, sorry, but you got that wrong. Australia is an exporter of wheat. We don't export any rice. None. What's happened in Indonesia is that imports of rice have gone down. That doesn't hurt us. But imports of wheat have gone up. You know, before the Asian financial crisis, Indonesia was the world's largest importer of rice. Mid-90s. Largest importer of rice in the world. And guess what? Indonesia is now the world's largest importer of wheat. So the rice protection policy has caused a substitution of wheat for rice. But wheat-based noodles and things like that, that's all benefiting us in Australia. So thank you very much. If I was here representing Australian trade policy, I would say thank you for protecting the rice sector. Thank you for all those imports of wheat. That's great for us. Terima kasih.